The rotor blade hung at the wrong angle, twisted metal catching the harsh desert sun like a broken promise. $20 million of Apache gunship sat grounded on the tarmac at Forward Operating Base Sentinel, its sophisticated targeting systems dark, its twin engines silent, the kind of silence that made colonels nervous and generals furious. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen stepped out of the dusty transport truck, her worn tool bag slung over one shoulder, safety goggles pushed up on her forehead. She looked small next to the massive aircraft, barely 5'4" in her desert combat boots, with calloused hands and oil stains under her fingernails that spoke of countless hours elbow-deep in machinery. Her uniform bore the subdued patch of aircraft maintenance, no combat ribbons visible, no indicators of anything beyond routine mechanical work. Colonel Robert Thorne watched her approach from the command trailer's air-conditioned doorway, his jaw tight with frustration. 3 days. 3 days this bird had been down while his unit operated with reduced air support in Taliban territory. The manufacturer's tech support was a week out. His own mechanics had thrown up their hands after 12 hours of diagnostic failures. And now, Fort Campbell had sent him this. "That's our expert," he muttered to Major Patricia Hayes beside him. "She looks like she should be working on Humvees, not our most sophisticated weapons platform." Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Maya moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to stay invisible. She approached the Apache without fanfare, without the swagger most specialists brought to high-profile repairs. Her steps were measured, deliberate, her eyes already scanning the aircraft's damaged systems with an intensity that didn't match the casual dismissal in the officers' voices behind her. The morning briefing had been brutal. Intelligence suggested a convoy ambush planned for the southern ridge, exactly the kind of operation that required Apache overwatch. Without air support, the ground teams would be going in blind, vulnerable, exposed. The pressure to get this bird flying wasn't just about pride or efficiency. It was about lives. Maya set her tool bag down beside the aircraft's nose and pulled out a diagnostic tablet that looked decades newer than standard maintenance equipment. She moved around the Apache in a pattern that seemed random to observers, but was actually a systematic inspection routine. Checking access panels, testing connections, her fingers finding stress points and failure indicators with the kind of instinctive knowledge that came from experience, not training manuals. "Think she'll figure out what Harvard and Boeing couldn't?" Major Hayes asked quietly. Colonel Thorne snorted. "She's not even asking questions. Real specialists ask questions." But Maya wasn't asking questions because she didn't need to. The damage pattern was familiar. The way the rotor assembly had failed, the specific electronic failures in the targeting system, the cascade of malfunctions that had grounded the aircraft. She had seen it before. Not in a maintenance manual or training simulation, but in the field, under fire, when aircraft came back from missions with battle damage that looked like mechanical failure until you knew what to look for. Her fingers traced a section of the rotor hub where the metal had stress fractures that were almost invisible unless you knew the exact angle to examine them. The kind of damage that came from hard maneuvering under load, the kind of flying that pushed aircraft beyond normal operational parameters, the kind of flying that happened when pilots were trying to keep ground teams alive. Maya pulled a small flashlight from her pocket and crouched beside the nose gear, examining something that made her pause. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly, not confusion, but recognition. The kind of recognition that came with unwelcome memories. 20 feet away, Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison was watching her with growing interest. Morrison had been maintaining aircraft for 8 years, had worked on everything from Black Hawks to Chinooks, and he could tell the difference between someone going through the motions and someone who actually knew what they were looking at. The new tech wasn't checking standard diagnostic points. She was looking at places where real damage hid, the places where experience taught you problems actually lived. "Hey, Luis," Morrison called to the mechanic working on a nearby Humvee. "You see how she's working?" Sergeant Luis Vargas looked up, following Morrison's gaze. "Yeah, that's not basic maintenance technique." "No," Morrison agreed. "That's something else." Maya stood and moved to the cockpit, her movements still unhurried, but with a purposefulness that suggested she was following a specific mental checklist. She climbed into the pilot's seat with the kind of casual familiarity that made Morrison's eyebrows rise. Most maintenance personnel were careful around flight controls, hesitant to touch anything that might affect aircraft operation. Maya settled into the seat like she belonged there. Her hands moved across the instrument panel with muscle memory, not reading labels or checking procedures, just knowing where everything was. She powered up the diagnostic systems, and the cockpit came alive with warning lights and status displays. Instead of looking overwhelmed by the complexity, she seemed to relax, as if the chaos of information was actually comforting. Colonel Thorne emerged from the command trailer, his patience finally exhausted. "Sergeant," he barked, striding across the tarmac. "How long is this going to take? I need an ETA." Maya looked up from the instruments, her expression calm but unreadable. "I'll have it flying in 2 hours, sir." 2 hours? Thorne's voice cracked with disbelief. "The manufacturer said minimum 48 hours for parts alone." "I don't need parts," Maya replied quietly. "The damage isn't what it appears to be." Major Hayes joined them, curiosity overriding protocol. "What do you mean?" Maya climbed out of the cockpit and moved to the rotor assembly. "This looks like mechanical failure, but it's actually battle damage. The aircraft took small arms fire during its last mission. The rounds didn't penetrate, but they created microfractures in the rotor hub that propagated under operational stress." Silence fell around the small group. Thorne's frown deepened. The pilot's report made no mention of taking fire. "Pilots don't always know," Maya said simply, "especially if they were focused on ground support operations. The damage signature is consistent with 7.62 mm rounds from approximately 800 meters. The shooter was skilled enough to target structural points, but the range prevented full penetration." Morrison felt a chill crawl up his spine. That wasn't textbook knowledge. That was field experience, the kind that came from examining aircraft after combat missions, from understanding how weapons affected machinery under battlefield conditions. "How could you possibly know the caliber and range?" Hayes asked, her analytical mind demanding specifics. Maya's hand moved unconsciously toward her left forearm, where the edge of her sleeve had ridden up slightly. For just a moment, Morrison caught a glimpse of dark ink against her skin, not a decorative tattoo, but something geometric, precise, technical. It looked like crosshairs. "Ballistic damage analysis," Maya answered, her voice neutral. "Standard diagnostic procedure for combat-deployed aircraft." But it wasn't standard. Morrison knew every maintenance manual, every diagnostic protocol. Ballistic damage analysis was specialty training, the kind reserved for technicians working in active combat zones with units that saw regular action. Forward, reconnaissance, special operations, the kind of units that didn't advertise their maintenance requirements. Colonel Thorne checked his watch. 2 hours, you're sure?" "Yes, sir." "And it will be mission ready?" Maya's eyes held his gaze steadily. "It will fly any mission you need it to fly." The certainty in her voice was absolute, the kind that came from having stakes where failure meant more than paperwork and reprimands. Thorne nodded curtly and walked back toward the command trailer, but Hayes lingered. "Where did you train for this kind of analysis?" she asked quietly. Maya was already moving back toward her tool bag. "Various places, ma'am." It wasn't an answer, and Hayes knew it, but there was something in the sergeant's tone that suggested pushing for details would lead to conversations neither of them was prepared to have in the middle of an active forward operating base. Morrison approached as Hayes walked away. "Need any help?" Maya looked up at him, sizing him up quickly. "Can you handle rotary wing hydraulics?" 8 years of experience, then yes, I can use the help. As they began working, Morrison noticed things that didn't fit the profile of a typical maintenance specialist. Maya's tool bag contained equipment he'd never seen in standard maintenance kits, precision instruments that looked more like surgical tools than mechanical implements. Her diagnostic tablet was running software that displayed information in ways he didn't recognize. And the way she moved around the aircraft, checking things that weren't on any maintenance checklist, examining systems that had nothing to do with the reported malfunction. It was like watching someone who knew secrets about the Apache that weren't written in any manual. "You work on a lot of these?" Morrison asked as they began disassembling the rotor hub. Enough, Maya replied without elaborating. In combat zones? Maya's hands paused for just a fraction of a second. Sometimes. Morrison decided not to push, but as they worked, he noticed her scars, small ones, mostly healed, the kind that came from working in dangerous conditions where tools slipped and environments were unforgiving. And on her hands, calluses that didn't come from turning wrenches, calluses that looked like they came from gripping something else entirely. The morning sun climbed higher, turning the desert air into shimmering heat waves. Maya worked with focused intensity, her movements efficient and sure. She didn't seem affected by the temperature or the pressure of the deadline. She simply worked, like someone who had learned to function in conditions much worse than a hot tarmac in relative safety. And slowly, as Morrison watched her transform the broken Apache into something that hummed with mechanical precision, he began to understand that Staff Sergeant Maya Chen was not what she appeared to be, not even close. The Apache's engine coughed to life with a throaty rumble that sent vibrations through the desert floor. Maya stepped back from the aircraft, wiping grease from her hands with a rag, her face showing the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just solved a puzzle that had stumped everyone else. The rotor blades began their slow rotation, building speed until they became a blur of lethal precision. Colonel Thorne emerged from the command trailer at a dead run, Major Hayes close behind. Around the tarmac, mechanics and support staff stopped what they were doing to stare at the Apache that had been $1 million paperweight just 90 minutes ago. How the hell? Thorne began, then caught himself. He approached the aircraft, circling it like he was looking for some trick, some explanation for what should have been impossible. Maya shut down the diagnostic tablet and began packing her tools with the same methodical precision she had used in the repair. No celebration, no pride, just the quiet efficiency of a job completed. Full systems. Check shows green across the board, she reported as Thorne reached her. All defensive systems operational, targeting computer calibrated. She's ready for whatever mission you need to run. Thorne shook his head slowly. 90 minutes. Boeing said this would take their best team 48 hours minimum. Boeing doesn't have field experience with combat damage, Maya replied simply. The words hung in the air like a challenge no one quite understood how to answer. Major Hayes frowned, her analytical mind catching something in the phrasing that didn't fit. Field experience? Hayes pressed. What kind of field experience does aircraft maintenance require? Maya shouldered her tool bag. The kind where aircraft need to fly again tomorrow, ma'am. Before anyone could ask for clarification, Captain Derek Nash approached from across the tarmac. Nash was the Apache pilot, and he had been pacing near the flight line ever since his bird went down 3 days ago. He was young, confident, and completely unprepared for what he was about to walk into. So, this is our miracle worker? Nash asked, looking Maya up and down with obvious skepticism. No offense, Sergeant, but you look like you should be working on lawnmowers, not attack helicopters. Morrison, who had been cleaning tools nearby, stiffened. He had spent the last hour watching Maya work with a precision and knowledge that had left him questioning everything he thought he knew about aircraft maintenance. Maya's expression didn't change. The aircraft is ready for flight, sir. Nash circled the Apache, running his hands along the rotor assembly where Maya had made her repairs. You're telling me you fixed what a team of engineers couldn't even diagnose? I identified the actual problem instead of chasing symptoms, Maya replied calmly. Which was what exactly? Nash's tone carried the condescension of someone who had never been told he was wrong about anything technical. Combat damage masquerading as mechanical failure. Nash laughed, a sharp sound that carried across the tarmac. Combat damage? Sweetheart, I was flying this bird when it went down. I think I would know if we took fire. The casual use of sweetheart made Morrison wince. He glanced at Maya, expecting some reaction, but her expression remained perfectly neutral. Small arms fire from approximately 800 meters, Maya continued as if Nash hadn't spoken. 762-millimeter rounds targeted at structural stress points. The shooter was experienced, probably military trained. Nash's laugh became more aggressive. Lady, I've been flying combat missions for 2 years. I know what taking fire feels like. This was a mechanical failure, pure and simple. The ballistic analysis? Ballistic analysis? Nash cut her off. What do you know about ballistics? You're a wrench turner, not a weapons specialist. Major Hayes watched the exchange with growing discomfort. Nash was being unnecessarily aggressive, but there was something about Maya's certainty that was unsettling in a different way. "Captain," Hayes interjected carefully, "perhaps we should focus on the fact that the aircraft is operational again." Nash wasn't done. "No, I want to understand this. Sergeant," he paused, reading her name tape. "Chen, you're telling me that you, a maintenance tech, can analyze ballistic damage better than the pilot who was actually in the aircraft when it happened?" Maya's hands stilled on her tool bag. For just a moment, something flickered across her expression. Not anger, not defensiveness, but something deeper and more dangerous. "I'm telling you that the aircraft took fire," she said quietly, "whether you were aware of it or not." "And how exactly would you know that?" Nash pressed. "What makes you such an expert on combat damage?" The question hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Around them, the normal sounds of base operations seemed to fade as conversations stopped and attention focused on the confrontation. Maya looked at Nash for a long moment, her gray eyes steady and unblinking. "Experience." "What kind of experience?" "The kind that keeps aircraft flying when lives depend on it." Nash's face flushed red. "That's not an answer. That's evasion. I want to know what qualifies you to tell me about my own aircraft." Colonel Thorne stepped forward, sensing the situation was escalating beyond professional disagreement. "Captain, the aircraft is operational. That's what matters." But Nash was committed now, his pride engaged in a way that made backing down impossible. "Sir, with respect, I don't think we should be taking technical assessments from someone who clearly doesn't understand the difference between mechanical failure and combat damage." Maya's tool bag slipped from her shoulder as she adjusted the strap. As she caught it, her sleeve rode up her left forearm, exposing several inches of skin marked with dark ink. The tattoo was geometric, precise, technical-looking. Morrison caught a glimpse of what looked like scope reticles overlaid with numbers. "Maybe," Nash continued, oblivious to what was now visible on Maya's arm, "we should get a real expert to verify the repair before we risk a $20 million aircraft on the assessment of someone who's probably never seen actual combat." The words fell into sudden silence. Maya had gone completely still, her gaze fixed on Nash with an intensity that made several nearby soldiers unconsciously step back. Morrison stared at the tattoo on her forearm, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. Those weren't decorative markings, they were technical, professional, the kind of ink that came with meaning, with achievement, with specialization. Staff Sergeant Luis Vargas had moved closer, drawn by the confrontation. He was looking at Maya's exposed forearm, and his face had gone pale. Vargas had done 2 tours in Afghanistan, had worked with forward reconnaissance units, and he recognized what he was seeing. "Holy shit," Vargas whispered, barely audible. Maya heard him. Her eyes flicked to Vargas, then to Morrison, both of whom were staring at her tattoo with expressions of dawning recognition. Captain Nash was still talking, still pressing his point about expertise and qualifications, completely unaware that the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "I think we need to establish some basic facts here," Nash said, his voice rising. "I'm a commissioned officer and a qualified pilot. She's enlisted maintenance. I was in the aircraft when it allegedly took fire. She was nowhere near the operational area. I think it's pretty clear whose assessment should carry more weight." Maya slowly rolled her sleeve back down, covering the tattoo. But it was too late. Morrison and Vargas had seen enough, and they were both looking at her with expressions that Nash couldn't interpret, but that made them very, very uncomfortable. "You're right," Maya said quietly, so quietly that Nash had to strain to hear her. "You were in the aircraft." "Exactly. Flying at approximately 150 feet, heading 270, providing close air support for a convoy that was taking fire from elevated positions." Nash blinked. "How could you possibly know our flight parameters?" "The damage pattern indicates specific angle of attack, specific altitude, specific aircraft orientation relative to ground fire." That's not possible to determine from mechanical damage." Maya shouldered her tool bag again. "It is if you know what to look for." "And what exactly should I be looking for?" Maya met his eyes directly. "The truth." The exchange had drawn attention from across the tarmac. Other mechanics, pilots, support staff were gravitating toward the confrontation, sensing something significant happening without understanding what. Colonel Thorne checked his watch. "Captain, we need to brief the mission. The convoy leaves in 2 hours." Nash nodded, but didn't move. He was staring at Maya with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. "I still want to understand how a maintenance sergeant knows so much about combat operations," he said. Maya looked around at the circle of faces now watching the exchange. Morrison, whose expression had shifted from curiosity to something approaching recognition. Vargas, who was staring at her with wide eyes. Major Hayes, who was frowning with the intensity of someone working through a complex problem. And Captain Nash, whose arrogance was about to collide with reality in a way that would change everything. "Some knowledge," Maya said carefully, "comes with a price." The mission briefing tent was stifling in the afternoon heat, canvas walls trapping the desert air like an oven. Maps covered every surface, marked with red zones, patrol routes, and the zigzag lines that indicated improvised explosive device threats. Colonel Thorne stood at the front, pointer in hand, addressing the dozen officers and senior NCOs gathered around the planning table. "Intelligence suggests the convoy will be hit at Checkpoint Bravo," Thorne said, tapping a narrow pass between 2 hills on the topographical map. "It's a natural choke point, elevated positions on both sides, limited escape routes." Captain Nash studied the map with the focused intensity of someone whose life would depend on reading it correctly. Beside him, Major Hayes was taking notes, her analytical mind working through contingencies and backup plans. Maya stood in the back corner of the tent, officially present only because she might need to provide technical support if the Apache developed problems during the mission. She was supposed to be invisible, just another piece of support equipment, but her eyes were locked on the map with an intensity that had nothing to do with mechanical concerns. "The Apache will provide overwatch from here," Thorne continued, indicating a position north of the convoy route. "Captain Nash, you'll have clear sight lines to both potential ambush sites." Maya's hand moved unconsciously toward her left forearm, fingers tracing the edge of her sleeve where the tattoo remained hidden. Her breathing had changed, becoming slower, more controlled, the kind of breathing that came with muscle memory. "Sir," said Master Sergeant Alex Rodriguez, the convoy commander, "what about the southern ridge? That elevation gives a clear shot at the overwatch position." Thorne squinted at the map. "Intelligence doesn't indicate any enemy presence on the southern ridge." "Intelligence has been wrong before," Rodriguez replied diplomatically. Maya stepped forward before she could stop herself. "The southern ridge is the primary threat." Every head in the tent turned toward her. The silence was immediate and uncomfortable. Staff sergeants did not interrupt planning briefings. Support personnel did not offer tactical assessments. Colonel Thorne's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" Maya realized what she had done, but it was too late to retreat. "The southern ridge, sir. That's where the real danger is." "And how exactly would you know that, Sergeant?" Maya felt the weight of every eye in the tent. She could have deflected, could have claimed she was only pointing out what was obvious on the map. Instead, she heard herself saying, "The approach angles, the sight lines. If I were planning this ambush, that's where I would position my primary sniper." The tent fell silent except for the hum of generators outside and the distant sound of aircraft engines. Major Hayes set down her pen and stared at Maya with naked curiosity. Captain Nash found his voice first. "If you were planning the ambush?" Maya's jaw tightened. "Hypothetically, sir." "That's a very specific hypothetical," Hayes observed quietly. Rodriguez was studying Maya with new interest. "What makes you think they have a sniper?" "The pattern of previous attacks," Maya replied, her voice gaining confidence as she moved into familiar territory. "Single, precise. Shots at key personnel. No spray and pray, no suppressing fire. One shot, one kill. That's a sniper's signature." "You seem to know a lot about snipers," Nash said, his tone carrying an edge. Maya's eyes flicked to him, then away. "I've read the incident reports." But it was more than that, and everyone in the tent could sense it. The way she talked about sight lines and approach angles, the casual use of tactical terminology, the certainty in her voice when she discussed enemy capabilities. This wasn't academic knowledge. Staff Sergeant Morrison, who had been standing near the tent entrance, spoke up. Ma'am, when you were working on the Apache, you mentioned ballistic analysis. Where did you learn that? Maya turned toward him, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. Morrison saw something in her eyes, a flash of memory or recognition that belonged to someone who had seen things that support personnel weren't supposed to see. Various training courses, she answered carefully. What kind of training courses? Hayes pressed. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then, almost against her will, she said, Advanced Combat Systems Analysis, Weapons Effects Evaluation, Post-Incident Assessment Protocols. Rodriguez whistled softly. That's not standard maintenance training. No, Maya agreed, it's not. Colonel Thorne leaned forward across the map table. Sergeant Chen, I think you need to be more specific about your background. Maya's hand moved to her sleeve again, pulling it down to ensure the tattoo remained covered, but the gesture drew attention rather than deflecting it. Sir, I'm qualified aircraft maintenance, current on all rotary wing systems, cleared for complex repairs on sensitive platforms. That's not what I'm asking. Maya met his gaze steadily. With respect, sir, it's all you need to know for this mission. The tension in the tent was building like pressure behind a dam. Hayes was making notes again, but now she was writing questions, not tactical observations. Nash stepped closer to the map. Let's say you're right about the southern ridge. How would you neutralize that threat? Maya looked at the topographical lines, her eyes tracking elevation changes in sight lines with practiced ease. Counter-sniper team positioned here, she said, pointing to a hill east of the convoy route. Range would be approximately 1,200 meters. Difficult shot, but manageable with the right equipment and shooter. Manageable? Rodriguez asked. 1,200 meters is expert-level shooting. Maya realized too late that she had revealed more than she intended. I meant theoretically manageable. But the damage was done. Morrison was staring at her with growing understanding. Vargas, who had been silent since seeing her tattoo, was looking between Maya and the map with an expression of dawning recognition. How do you know it's manageable? Hayes asked quietly. Maya didn't answer immediately. She was looking at the map, but her mind was somewhere else, remembering mountains and distances, and the weight of a rifle that could reach across valleys to touch targets that existed only as heat signatures in a scope. Because, she said finally, some shots have to be taken regardless of the difficulty. The words fell into the tent like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples of implication that spread outward in silence. Rodriguez was the first to break it. You talk like someone who's taken those shots. Maya's eyes snapped back to the present, realizing that she had walked too far into dangerous territory. I talk like someone who's studied the requirements. Studied where? Thorne asked. Sir, because what you're describing isn't academic knowledge. What you're describing is operational experience. Maya felt the walls closing in. She had broken her own rules, had allowed the mission requirements to override her need for anonymity. But lives were at stake, and she couldn't stand by and watch people walk into an ambush based on faulty intelligence and wishful thinking. Colonel, she said carefully, I respectfully request permission to provide technical support from an alternate position. What alternate position? Maya pointed to the hill she had identified for the counter-sniper position. There, in case the Apache needs emergency technical support during the operation. Nash laughed sharply. That's 1,200 meters from the aircraft. What kind of technical support could you provide from that distance? Maya looked at him with an expression that made him take an involuntary step backward. The kind that keeps everyone alive. The tent went quiet again. This time the silence was heavier, charged with implications that no one quite wanted to voice. Morrison cleared his throat. Ma'am, that position would require someone qualified in long-range observation and communication. I'm qualified. In what? Maya paused, realizing she was at a crossroads. She could continue the deception, maintain her cover, stay invisible, or she could do what needed to be done to protect the mission and the people who were about to risk their lives based on incomplete intelligence. She chose the mission. Advanced reconnaissance, she said quietly. Long-range surveillance, target identification, and threat assessment. Rodriguez set down his coffee cup. That's not maintenance training. No, Maya agreed. It's not. Colonel Thorne studied her face, seeing something there that he hadn't noticed before. The calm competence, the way she stood, the precision of her language when discussing tactical problems. It was familiar, but from a different context. "Sergeant Chen," he said slowly, "I think it's time you told us exactly what your qualifications are." Maya looked around the tent at the faces watching her. Morrison, who was beginning to understand that everything he thought he knew about her was wrong. Vargas, whose expression suggested he had already figured out more than she wanted him to know. Hayes, who was taking notes with the intensity of someone building a case file. And Captain Nash, whose arrogance was about to collide with a truth that would change his understanding of everything that had happened since she arrived on base. Maya reached up and slowly rolled back her left sleeve, exposing the tattoo that she had kept hidden. The geometric precision of scope reticles, the numbers that indicated confirmed kills, the small symbols that marked specific campaigns, specific missions, specific moments when the difference between life and death had been measured in millimeters of scope adjustment and heartbeats of breath control. Rodriguez saw it first. His face went white. "Jesus Christ!" Morrison stared at the ink, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. That's not," Vargas found his voice. "That's a sniper's tattoo." Maya looked directly at Colonel Thorne. "My primary military occupation specialty isn't aircraft maintenance," she said quietly. "It's special operations, long-range precision engagement." The words hung in the desert air like heat shimmer, distorting everything anyone thought they understood about the quiet woman who had fixed their helicopter and was now telling them how to stay alive. Captain Nash opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. He was staring at Maya's exposed forearm, at the precise markings that told a story he was not prepared to read. Maya rolled her sleeve back down. "And that southern ridge is definitely where they'll position their primary shooter, because that's exactly where I would put him." The convoy rolled out at 800 hours into a morning that felt wrong from the first mile. The desert heat was already building, but that wasn't what made Master Sergeant Rodriguez check his weapon for the third time in 10 minutes. Intelligence had been spotty for days, communications were intermittent, and now they were moving through terrain that offered too many advantages to anyone with patience and a good rifle. Maya crouched on the southern ridge, exactly where she had predicted the enemy sniper would be, except she had gotten there first. Her modified M24 rifle lay perfectly still against the rocky outcropping, scope trained on the convoy route below. She wore no rank insignia, no unit patches, nothing that would identify her if captured. Just desert camouflage and the tools of her trade. Through her earpiece, she monitored the convoy's progress and Captain Nash's Apache, circling overhead at what he considered a safe distance. Nash's voice crackled through the radio with routine position updates, confident and unaware that death was tracking his aircraft through crosshairs 800 meters away. Maya had been in position since 0400, long enough to map every possible threat angle, every escape route, every piece of cover that mattered, long enough to spot the three-man sniper team that had arrived an hour behind her and set up on the EU opposite ridge, exactly where she had predicted. The enemy sniper was good. Very good. Maya watched him through her scope as he made micro-adjustments to his rifle, calculating for wind and distance. His spotter was feeding him information through whispered communications. Their equipment was Russian, modern, deadly accurate at the ranges they were planning to engage. "Overwatch, this is ground element," Rodriguez's voice came through her earpiece. "Approaching checkpoint Bravo. All quiet so far." "Copy, ground element," Nash replied from the Apache. "I have eyes on your position. No movement detected." But Maya could see what Nash couldn't. The sniper team was tracking the helicopter, waiting for it to settle into a stable hover pattern. The moment Nash committed to providing close air support for the convoy, he would become a stationary target at a known distance. Maya keyed her radio with a transmission that would reach only Colonel Thorne's command frequency. "Overwatch 6, this is Ghost. Enemy sniper team confirmed. Southern Ridge, bearing 270 from my position. Primary target is your Apache." Static filled her earpiece for several seconds. Then Thorne's voice, tight with controlled urgency. "Ghost, this is Overwatch 6. Authenticate." Maya provided her classified call sign and authorization code, identifiers that had been buried so deep in military databases that most people with clearance to access them didn't know they existed. Another pause. Then, authenticated. What's your assessment? Three-man team. Experienced, equipped for long-range precision engagement. They're tracking your bird, waiting for a firing solution. In the command center back at base, Colonel Thorne was staring at communications equipment that had just provided confirmation of something impossible. The call sign and authentication codes belonged to someone who was supposed to be dead, someone whose classified file contained achievements that most special operations personnel could only dream about. "Ghost," he said carefully. "What's your recommended course of action?" Maya's scope tracked the enemy sniper as he made final adjustments to his weapon. "I can neutralize the threat, but your Apache needs to break pattern immediately. Random flight path, multiple altitude changes, do not maintain hover for more than 30 seconds. Copy that. Nash, this is Overwatch 6. You need to—" The radio exploded with static as something jammed the communications. Maya watched the enemy sniper's spotter activate electronic countermeasures designed to isolate the convoy and helicopter from command support. Nash's voice cut through the interference, confused and frustrated. "Overwatch 6, I'm losing communications. Say again your last transmission." But there was no response. The convoy was on its own, moving through the kill zone with an Apache overhead that had no idea it was being tracked by a sniper capable of bringing down aircraft with precision rifle fire. Maya watched the enemy sniper settle into his final firing position, 840 meters to the Apache, which was maintaining a steady hover while Nash tried to re-establish communications. A sitting target. She had perhaps 30 seconds before the sniper fired. 30 seconds to make a decision that would either save lives or blow her cover permanently. The enemy spotter was calling wind conditions. The sniper's breathing was settling into the rhythm that preceded the shot. Maya's finger moved to her trigger. Range to target, 1,260 meters. Wind, 3 to 5 miles per hour. Variable direction. Elevation difference, -47 meters. The mathematics of death calculated in heartbeats. Through her scope, she could see the enemy sniper's finger beginning to apply pressure to his trigger. Maya fired. The rifle's report echoed across the valley like thunder. The .300 Winchester Magnum round crossed the distance in less than 2 seconds, arriving precisely as the enemy sniper was completing his trigger pull. His shot went wide, the round passing harmlessly beneath Nash's aircraft as the sniper's body jerked backward from Maya's bullet impact. The enemy weapon tumbled from the ridge, clattering against rocks as it fell. Nash's voice filled the radio spectrum. "I'm taking fire! Repeat, I'm taking fire!" Maya was already tracking the spotter, who was frantically trying to locate where the counterfire had originated. Her second shot dropped him before he could identify her position. The third member of the enemy team, a communications specialist, broke cover and ran. Maya let him go. He was no longer a threat, and dead men couldn't provide intelligence about how their ambush had been compromised. "All stations, this is Ghost," Maya transmitted on Nash's frequency. "Threat neutralized. Apache is clear to continue mission." Nash's voice was shaky with adrenaline. "Ghost? Who the hell is Ghost? Where did that fire come from?" Maya was already breaking down her position, packing her rifle with the speed that came from years of practice. "Southern Ridge. The threat has been eliminated." "I need eyes on your position. I need to know who—" "Negative," Maya cut him off. "Maintain your mission. Convoy is still vulnerable to secondary threats." But even as she said it, Maya knew the engagement had changed everything. She had fired precision shots at extreme range under combat conditions, eliminating threats that most snipers couldn't have detected, let alone engaged. Nash might not understand the implications yet, but others would. Rodriguez's voice came through the radio. "All elements. Convoy is through checkpoint Bravo. No contact. Proceeding to objective." Maya slung her rifle and began moving across the ridgeline toward an extraction point she had identified hours earlier. But she knew extraction was the least of her problems. The radio intercepts would be analyzed, the ballistic evidence would be examined, questions would be asked that she wasn't prepared to answer. Her secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message from Colonel Thorne. "Ghost, report to debrief immediately upon return to base." Maya looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. She had known this moment would come eventually. The moment when staying invisible became impossible, when the mission requirements exceeded her ability to remain anonymous. As she moved through the desert terrain toward the base, Maya realized that Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, aircraft maintenance specialist, was about to disappear forever. In her place would stand someone whose very existence challenged everything the military thought it knew about heroes, sacrifice, and the price of keeping dangerous secrets. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything, and it helps me bring you more inspiring military stories like this one. The debriefing room at FOB Sentinel was designed for routine mission analysis, not for conversations that could reshape careers and challenge the fundamental assumptions of military hierarchy. Colonel Thorne sat across from Maya at a metal table, scarred by years of coffee cups and classified discussions, a folder thick with documents spread between them. Maya had changed from her field gear back into standard desert utilities, but she couldn't change the way Thorne was looking at her, like someone trying to reconcile two completely different people who somehow occupied the same physical space. The ballistic analysis came back, Thorne said quietly, tapping the top sheet in his folder. 2 shots, extreme range, both fatal hits, precision that our best snipers would struggle to achieve under ideal conditions. Maya sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap. I was fortunate with the wind conditions. Fortunate? Thorne's voice carried a note of disbelief. Sergeant, that was a 1,200-meter shot downhill in variable wind. Fortune had nothing to do with it. He opened the folder and pulled out a photograph taken from Nash's helmet camera during the engagement. It showed the moment of impact, the enemy sniper's body jerking backward from a hit, so precise it had taken him in the center of the upper chest. Our analysts estimate you had less than 30 seconds from identification to engagement. Most snipers need 2 to 3 times that long to calculate a shot of this complexity. Maya's expression didn't change. Time was a factor. Thorne leaned back in his chair, studying her. Where did you train? Various locations. That's not an answer. Maya met his gaze steadily. With respect, sir, some training is classified above your clearance level. The words fell between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Thorne felt something shift in his understanding of the woman across from him. He'd been thinking of her as a subordinate with hidden skills. Now he was beginning to realize that the hierarchy he assumed might not be what it appeared. My clearance level, he repeated slowly, is classified secret with compartmentalized access to special operations planning. Yes, sir? And you're telling me that your training is classified above that level? Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a thin plastic card, the kind used for high security access. She placed it on the table between them. Thorne picked up the card and felt his breath catch. Top secret sensitive, compartmentalized information with additional coding he had never seen before. Access levels that existed in theoretical discussions about deep black operations. Jesus Christ, he whispered. My training, Maya said quietly, was designed to prepare operators for missions that officially never happened, conducted by units that officially never existed, against targets whose elimination was officially never authorized. Thorne set the card down with shaking fingers. And you've been here for 6 months pretending to be aircraft maintenance? I haven't been pretending anything. I'm qualified aircraft maintenance, among other things. Before Thorne could respond, the door opened and Major Hayes entered, followed by Captain Nash and Master Sergeant Rodriguez. Nash looked like he hadn't slept, his usual confidence replaced by the hollow-eyed uncertainty of someone whose world had been violently rearranged. Sir, Hayes said, we need to discuss what happened out there. Nash stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Maya with an intensity that bordered on obsession. I want to know who she is, really is. Maya looked at Nash with the calm assessment of someone evaluating a potential threat. You know who I am. No, Nash said, his voice rising. I know what you told us you are. What I saw out there was something else entirely. Rodriguez cleared his throat. Ma'am, that shot you took, I've worked with Delta Force snipers who couldn't have made that shot under those conditions. You don't work with Delta Force, Maya replied quietly. No, ma'am, I don't. But I've worked with people who do. And they talk about a certain level of capability that exists above normal special operations. Hayes was taking notes again, her analytical mind working through implications that made her uncomfortable. The authentication codes you used during the engagement, Colonel Thorne verified them through classified channels. They belonged to someone with a designation I've never seen before. Maya's hand moved unconsciously toward her left forearm, where the tattoo remained hidden beneath her sleeve. Designations exist for operational security reasons. Whose operational security? Nash demanded. Who are you protecting? Everyone in this room, Maya answered without hesitation. The simplicity of the statement created a silence that none of them knew how to break. Thorne looked at the access card on the table, then back at Maya. The call. Signed Ghost, he said slowly. That's not randomly assigned. No, sir. How's it earned? Maya was quiet for so long that Hayes looked up from her notes, wondering if she would answer at all. By being officially dead, Maya said finally. For 7 years. Rodriguez felt the ground shift beneath his understanding of reality. What does that mean? It means, Maya continued, that Staff Sergeant Maya Chen was killed in action in Afghanistan in 2016. Her body was never recovered. Her family received a folded flag and the thanks of a grateful nation. Nash stared at her in disbelief. That's impossible. The death was necessary for operational security, for the safety of ongoing missions and the protection of classified capabilities. Thorne's voice was barely above a whisper. And the person sitting in this room is someone who doesn't officially exist, someone who was rebuilt for specific purposes with specific training for missions that require complete deniability. Hayes set down her pen, her hands shaking slightly. You're talking about ghost operations, assignments that exist outside normal military structure. I'm talking about necessity, Maya corrected. Sometimes threats exist that can only be addressed by people who aren't bound by normal constraints. Rodriguez swallowed hard. What kind of threats? Maya looked around the room at faces that were struggling to process information that challenged everything they thought they knew about military operations. The kind, she said, that would have killed everyone in that convoy today if someone hadn't been positioned to stop them. Nash slumped into a chair as if his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. The Apache, if you hadn't taken that shot. The enemy sniper would have put a round through your engine compartment, your aircraft would have gone down in hostile territory, the convoy would have been pinned down without air support, and everyone would have died. The weight of that reality settled over the room like smoke from a funeral pyre. They had been saved by someone who wasn't supposed to exist, using capabilities that weren't supposed to be available, in service of missions that weren't supposed to be discussed. Thorne picked up Maya's access card again, studying the codes and clearance levels that represented a world parallel to his own but invisible to normal military structure. How many others? He asked quietly. Others? People like you. People who officially don't exist. Maya's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Enough. Are they all dead? Officially, yes. That's what makes us useful. Dead people don't have families to worry about. They don't have careers to protect. They don't have anything to lose except the mission. Hayes found her voice. And when the mission is over? Sometimes we get to come back, Maya said. Sometimes we get assigned to new missions. And sometimes... She didn't finish the sentence. Rodriguez understood. Sometimes you stay dead. That's the bargain, Maya confirmed. Complete commitment to the mission in exchange for the freedom to operate outside normal constraints. Nash was staring at Maya with something approaching awe mixed with terror. How long have you been dead? 7 years, 4 months, 16 days? The precision of the answer struck everyone in the room. She wasn't approximating. She was counting. Thorne set the access card back down and looked directly at Maya. And now we know. Yes? Which means? Maya was quiet for a moment, considering implications that reached far beyond the small room where they sat. It means, she said finally, that everything changes. The secure communications terminal in Colonel Thorne's office hummed with encrypted data streams as verification requests cascaded through military databases that most personnel didn't know existed. Maya sat in the corner, watching the faces of officers who were learning that their understanding of military structure had been fundamentally incomplete. General Patricia Blackwood appeared on the secure video link with the bearing of someone who had been expecting this call for years. Her uniform carried ribbons that told stories of classified operations, and her eyes held the weight of decisions that existed in the shadows between official policy and operational necessity. "Colonel Thorne," General Blackwood said without preamble, "I understand you have questions about one of your personnel." "Ma'am, we have someone claiming to be officially deceased, but carrying authentication codes I've never seen before. Her capabilities exceed anything in her personnel file." General Blackwood's gaze shifted to Maya, and her expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not surprise, but recognition mixed with something that might have been relief. "Sergeant Chen," the general said, "or should I use your operational designation?" Maya stood and moved into the camera's field of view. "Ma'am, it's been a long time." "Yes, ma'am." Colonel Thorne looked between them, sensing history and connections that predated anything in the official record. General Blackwood leaned forward slightly. "Colonel, the person you're looking at is one of 12 operators trained for missions that exist outside normal military command structure. Her official death was necessary to provide the kind of operational freedom that traditional military hierarchy cannot accommodate." Nash, who had been silent since the video call began, found his voice. "What kind of missions?" The general's expression hardened. "The kind that prevent wars rather than fight them, the kind that eliminate threats before they become national security emergencies, the kind that allow elected officials to sleep peacefully without knowing exactly how their safety is maintained." Hayes was taking notes, her analytical mind working to process information that challenged every assumption she had made about military operations. "Ma'am," Hayes said carefully, "are you saying that there's an entire parallel structure operating outside normal military command?" "I'm saying," General Blackwood replied, "that some problems require solutions that exist outside the normal chain of command. Solutions that require people who are willing to sacrifice not just their lives, but their identities, their histories, their very existence." Rodriguez stepped closer to the screen. "How many people like her are there?" "Fewer than when the program began. This kind of work has a high attrition rate." Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Thorne noticed the reaction and filed it away as another piece of information that suggested depths he hadn't begun to explore. "General," Thorne said, "what exactly is Sergeant Chen's actual rank and authority?" General Blackwood was quiet for a moment, as if considering how much truth the situation could bear. "Her official rank remains Staff Sergeant, because that provides the operational flexibility she needs to blend into normal military environments. Her actual authority level is classified, but it includes mission command autonomy and the ability to take whatever action she deems necessary to protect national security interests." Nash laughed, a sharp sound with no humor in it. "Whatever action she deems necessary? That's not how the military works." "Captain," General Blackwood said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that ended conversations, "the military doesn't work the way you think it works. What you see is one layer of a structure that has many levels, many purposes, many ways of addressing threats that conventional forces cannot handle." Maya spoke for the first time since the call began. "General, my operational status may be compromised. The engagement today required capabilities that cannot be easily explained through normal channels." "Understood. Are you requesting extraction?" "Negative. The mission isn't complete." "What mission?" Thorne asked, feeling like he was grasping for understanding in a conversation that kept moving beyond his comprehension. General Blackwood looked at Maya, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "For the past 6 months," the general said, "Sergeant Chen has been investigating intelligence leaks that have compromised 3 separate special operations missions. Her cover as aircraft maintenance personnel allowed her access to personnel, communications, and classified information flows." Hayes set down her pen. "She's been conducting counterintelligence operations." "Among other things," Rodriguez swallowed hard. "And she found what she was looking for." Maya reached into her pocket and pulled out a small digital device, placing it on Thorne's desk. "Complete communications intercepts, financial records, and operational intelligence proving that someone in this command structure is providing classified information to hostile foreign intelligence services." The room went silent. Thorne stared at the device as if it might explode. "Who?" he asked quietly. "That information is being processed through appropriate channels," General Blackwood said. "But I can tell you that the investigation has identified multiple compromised personnel across several commands." Nash was staring at Maya with something approaching awe. "And you've been gathering this intelligence while pretending to fix helicopters." "I haven't been pretending," Maya replied. "I'm qualified aircraft maintenance. It's an excellent cover because most people assume that's all I am." "Most people," Thorne repeated slowly, "but not everyone." "No, some people notice things that others miss." Rodriguez stepped forward. "Ma'am, when you saved us today, you blew your cover completely. Everyone knows you're not just maintenance now." Maya nodded. "Yes? So what happens now?" General Blackwood answered for her. "Now the investigation moves into its final phase. Now the people who have been compromising American lives face justice. And now some very difficult decisions need to be made about operational security and personnel protection." Thorne felt the weight of implications settling over him like a shroud. "General, are you saying that people in this room may be at risk?" "I'm saying that knowledge of classified operations carries responsibilities and dangers that most personnel are not prepared for." Maya looked around the room at faces that had fundamentally changed over the past several hours. People who had known her as support staff were now grappling with the reality that she represented capabilities and authority structures they hadn't known existed. "Colonel," she said quietly, "I need to ask everyone in this room to sign non-disclosure agreements that carry criminal penalties for violation." "And if someone refuses?" Nash asked. General Blackwood's expression was stone-cold serious. "Refusal isn't an option. This information is classified at levels that carry automatic prosecution for unauthorized disclosure. Everyone who knows about Sergeant Chen's actual role and capabilities is now part of a classified operation, whether they intended to be or not." Hayes looked up from her notes with an expression of dawning understanding. "And that's why people like her have to be officially dead. Because the knowledge of what they do is too dangerous to allow normal social connections." "Exactly," General Blackwood confirmed. "The people who do this work sacrifice everything: family, friends, normal life, the possibility of recognition or appreciation. They do it because someone has to, and they're willing to pay the price." Maya was watching the faces around her, seeing the moment when people realized that knowing her truth made them part of something larger and more dangerous than anything they had signed up for. "General," she said, "permission to continue the mission as planned." "Granted. But Sergeant, your cover is blown. You'll need to operate differently from now on." Maya nodded. "Understood." As General Blackwood ended the call, the room fell into a silence that was heavy with new understanding and new fears. Everyone present now knew that the military they thought they served was only part of a larger structure, that the woman they had dismissed as support staff represented capabilities that most of them couldn't have imagined. And they also knew that their lives had just become infinitely more complicated and dangerous than they had been an hour ago. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These true tales keep the courage alive for generations to come. And in the comments, tell us, where are you watching from and who's the quiet leader you'll never forget?